Okay, is my presentation visible? All right,
Yes.
great. All right, well, thank you for the brief introduction, and it's a real pleasure to have the opportunity to introduce our pilot agroforestry project, which is in southern Finland. These days, I don't get as many opportunities to talk about it as the other parts of our project. So I'm Joshua Finch, and I'm the project manager of the agroforestry in Newland project. And today we will be looking at a very special and quite innovative, I think at least, demonstration of successional silvo arable agroforestry. So my project is actually a 3-year development project. It is public and private financing, just under 300,000 euros over 3 years. We have a number of different funders. And before you think I have 300,000 euros for my pilot site, we have 3 work packages for the overall project. We're here today to talk about the 3rd work package, which began as its own independent project a few years ago and has been grandfathered into a larger project with a focus on helping farmers understand agroforestry, as well as the broader agricultural community of professionals. The 3rd work package feeds information back into through hands-on experience with agroforestry in Finland to both of the other work packages, while still kind of itching our, scratching our back and our need for innovation in the field. So the innovation with our pilot site begins with our objectives and the fact that our objectives are not equal. So we have 4 different objectives for this site, and they're actually better thought of as being sequential rather than being something that we tried to go to all 4 places at the same time. The first and foremost I'll talk about is the bioremediation. So the innovation that we're looking at here is taking a lot of the ideas in the regenerative agriculture space around using biodiverse plant communities and the biodiverse socio microbiome in the soil, as well as the different kinds of ecosystem services above ground that these biodiverse plant communities create to change and alter site conditions. So we have deliberately overinflated, so to speak, or extended the biological leg of the 3-legged stool of soil health. If you think of soil health as being chemical, physical, and biological in nature, we have extended the biological end to see just how far can we go with this. Now that is what leads us to having a successional agroforestry project, because succession can refer to ecological concepts, but also to economic concepts. And it just makes sense for us to reintroduce woody perennial crops into our farming land if we want to create a thriving agro ecosystem. So those are the 2 that I'll talk about today. If we're successful with those 2, then what we want to do is integrate with the community supported agriculture program that we have on the farm that we partner with for this project. And then if all of that works, if it's profitable, if it's interesting, and it works, then maybe that is something that will attract more and new people into agriculture, offering new enterprises. So successional agroforestry, as I said, can be thought of from an ecological point of view. So that's basically just the idea that different groups of organisms have different niches. So they have different places in space and time that they're adapted to. And as they live there and they go through their life process, they alter the site conditions. And as those site conditions are changed, then it opens new niches for new organisms to move in. So that's like the quick and dirty, most basic idea about what succession could be. It's a bit more complicated perhaps than it needs to be for farmers. So I'll introduce very simply what it means from an economical point of view. So traditionally, if you can say traditionally in agroforestry, considering how underutilized it actually is, let's just say we had an agricultural field and we wanted to introduce something simple, something new like apples or pears, and we could do some kind of silvo-arable system. Well, the problem with this, and this is the thing that many farmers notice immediately, is that you've got year 1, you plant the trees, and then it's a waiting game that you're investing money and resources to getting these trees to a bearing age. Now, I understand that depending on your context, so your rootstock, your climate, the microclimate of the field, all these things can actually reduce the number of years it takes to reach a bearing age for the trees, but it still has this gap. There's a return on investment gap with planting only the kind of long-term species and then waiting. So what successional agroforestry does is it creates this idea that, okay, yeah, we want apples and pears, but what can we grow in the same space at the same time that is going to start bearing and producing revenue, not necessarily profit, but revenue before the apples and pears come along. So we work backwards from those desired species. That's one way to do it, is you work backwards and you start filling in. And you can fill in with different kinds of crops. This is just an example here on the left: cut flowers, garlic, rhubarb, currants, black elderberries. And then we get to our larger fruit crops. And as they grow together, you're receiving some kind of revenue, and you're also taking care of those crops, which means that you're improving the site conditions for the apples and pears with this incentive that you have something to sell, and you're also building a story and a customer base along the way. There's a lot of things to be said about it, but that's the basic idea, is that you're going to put some things in the ground. Some of them may stay for a long time, like the rhubarb is planted at the same time as everything else, and it'll live and produce for quite a number of years. But other ones, like garlic or maybe even cut flowers, might have to shift and change. You may not have space for them anymore. So they've been succeeded out of the system. So that's it at a very basic level, what it could possibly be. And as you can see, you've got some revenue coming in over the years before those trees come in, which is nice too, because then all the financial pressure for the apples and pears to produce a really great, yield and a really good profit margin also gets a little bit reduced. Ideally, you're not actually worried about the apples and pears anymore because you're so focused on everything else. So you have a lot of success along the way if you do this a slightly different direction. Now, in order to do this, you have to group the plants, and that's where this idea of stratification comes in. Sorry, I work from home, and my wife is up to something, if you can hear the vacuum. We have the stratification. So this is how we can put plants in different niches together through space and time, with the idea that we're going to reduce some of the competition that takes place, but also hopefully get some of the benefits of having the root intermingling and having the different and diverse microbiomes in the soil. So what does it look like in practice? Well, it certainly doesn't look as beautiful as it does on a spreadsheet or something like this. It's more like organized chaos. So this image of me on the right here is our young system struggling with drought last summer, but surprisingly, most of the species actually survive. But we have a plan. So the tree lines are 2 meters wide, which we can see on the left how I've broken down the actual bed into 3 different zones. So you have a 75 centimeter market garden bed, so you can use biointensive horticultural techniques for those early succession crops. And you can do cover cropping and things like this for soil improvement, so you get some modicum of crop rotation along the way. And then you have your perennial center, which you try to, just keep for the trees and other perennials as they go along. And that way we also have a 2 meter wide tree bed for the tree roots to use. So if you're going to have this idea of bioremediation, where the tree roots need to be growing to facilitate the best cycling of nutrients is towards the surface. Because even if you have beautiful deep soil, as a general rule, you'll have more gas exchange and more activity in the topsoil. So if you have a really narrow tree bed and you don't allow the trees to actually have fine feeder roots and all of that activity towards the soil surface, then they're not going to be the most robust trees in this kind of system with reduced inputs. So let me just keep going because I'm pretty ambitious for what I want to go to. As you can imagine, this has a lot of challenges. I've listed 7 on this page, but I'm only going to talk about 2. So the first one that I've highlighted is no models this far north. Okay, so there are forest gardens and there are different kinds of smaller scale and quite diverse agroforestry systems taking place, but they generally aren't in farming systems. Where you'll find systems like this are much further south, so in the Mediterranean climate, and then particularly in South America and Africa and India. So in places where trees grow a lot faster. So we don't have a lot of information to work on. So we just had to plan something to the best of my knowledge and start it. So there really isn't anything that we can say much at this point yet because the growth rate of trees in Finland is so small, but nothing to really work off. The other thing is that most of the mechanization, so a lot of the different kinds of tools that you can use with a tractor that just increase the efficiency per person, they're designed for monoculture tree or agroforestry systems. They're not designed for systems that have woody cash crops and herbaceous cash crops and annual cash crops in a bio-intensive system. And so this inevitably leads to a more labor-intensive program, but it also allows us to identify the places where new kinds of machines might be able to be developed, especially with the increase in robotics and AI. I think we're going to be able to see a lot more complexity come back into agriculture because of that kind of operation. But to our kind of credit, I guess we have an existing CSA at the partner farm that's all about apples. So our system actually has the opportunity to direct market, which reduces the actual cost of production significantly. So I think we're already down. So we're almost at the end. So what would I do differently? Extend the timeline. Don't just jump from an empty field to agroforestry. Put in a regenerative transition period so that your soil starts to improve and you actually see some benefits before putting in the expensive trees. Then put in agroforestry once the site can support some of those crops. So take a bit more time to do it. We couldn't because of the way projects typically work. You can't really get paid development money to kill weeds for a year or 2 years. It doesn't work that way. But this is one of our main outcomes. Perspectives on the future, it hasn't all been bad. We've only lost a handful of trees, even without doing a lot of changes to the soil chemistry, which we talk about on our project website more. It's a very beautiful system. We are seeing the formation of real soil now. So we have 8 centimeters of soil instead of cement, which is basically what we've been starting with. And we're going to accelerate that change over the next 2 years by very strategic use of specific organic inputs like quick-acting lime, polysulfate, which is very interesting mineral fertilizer, as well as on-farm bioferments to accelerate the biology. Recommendations for others, definitely extend your timeline. You want to work with beds that look like on the left where our field assistant is, almost no weeds. You can achieve that very cheaply if you have the time for it. Secondly, don't stop using inputs. We stopped using inputs for a very specific reason, for an innovation purpose. We wholly recommend that you continue to use inputs, so hopefully your garlic looks a lot better than this. It's a decent looking garlic crop, but it certainly wasn't the best. If you already have trees and you don't want to complicate it with a lot of other stuff, just work on the herbaceous layer, and in particular, try to extend the period of photosynthesis and soil biological activity by filling in, especially the spring ephemeral window for getting stuff in the system and providing habitat for pollinators and things like this. So there's a lot of places that I could go with this talk in 12 minutes. I've tried to be as fast as I can to talk about our innovation. We have a lot of information online, and you can also find out more information about agroforestry in Finland through the Finnish Agroforestry Network. Hopefully I wasn't too far over my 12 minutes.